Hello ladies and gentlemen, it's Mike here at Game From Scratch, and today we are talking about Amazon Lumberyard 1.28, which was just released. Now if you're regular to this channel, you know I always have fun when it comes to reinstalling Amazon each time there's a new release, because this takes me like 6 to 8 hours. The installation process sucks, no matter how you look at it. But the good news here is, this release, this 1.28 release, well, not a big deal, because I'm not going to install it. And I'm not going to install it because there's going to be no hands-on in this video, because the 1.28 release has almost nothing in it. So why am I doing a video on it? Well, I covered 1.27, I covered 1.26, 2.5, 2.4, and so on. This is a very thorough and complete channel about the world of game development, new major game engine release. I'm going to cover it here. But more importantly, they also made some announcements about the future. So we're going to look at those. Those are much more interesting than this release. Trust me. This release, I hate to use the word sucks, but it sucks. We'll see. Let's go take a look at what's in 1.28, and then we'll look at the other things that are in process, and that's probably why there hasn't been a whole lot of updates, because the last version, 1.27, came in December. So this is the first release for almost half a year. And what it has in it is, well, let's see. We have a new Twitch API gem. Gems are basically like add-ons or DLL extensions, modular ways of extending the game engine. Obviously, this is Amazon. Amazon wants you to use their services. In fact, that is how Lumberyard is monetized. This is a completely free-to-use game engine. Just if you use online multiplayer networking that you don't host yourself, you have to use Amazon's technology stack, or you got to pay a license. So as long as you're using like AWS or Amazon Online Services for your networking component, it is completely free to use. If you are making a single player game, 100% free to use. So we've got that. Twitch API, basically up-to-date APIs for Twitch. This one is actually kind of nice, and if I was going to bother to install it, well, maybe this would be better. We'll see some screenshots of this in just a second, but there are some quality life improvements in the setup assistance. One of these may actually be my direct feedback, because the installation process takes hours, literally hours, and there was no real progress bar on it. So you'd think your computer crashed. You had no way of knowing that it was still continuing, and when you're waiting literally hours, you need progress bars. So they have that progress bar to better track your build. I don't know if that's for the installation though. I think that's just for builds, which is unfortunately, but it's a step in the right direction, and they've streamlined the installation process. No longer do you have to go through and pick a whole bunch of crap if you want to build your stuff. You basically just have to click checkbox. We'll see that in just a second. And updates to LMBR_AWS. That's their command line interface tool for doing things like configuring your project, making builds, and so on. So several commands for managing gems, including player account gem, web communicator gem, and so on. And then a number of bug fixes, and we're done. That's it. That's literally all there is in this release. Here are the release notes. You're not going to find anything else in here because, well, that's it for the release. It is underwhelming, as Sloan once said. Again, Twitch integration, setup and configuration, some updated gems, a few bug fixes, and done. Now, what is nice here is in the installation process now, all you have to do is come in and say, yeah, I want to create, modify, and build projects, and it's not the 800 million questions it was before. It is now a tick box, and you will be able to do what the majority of people actually want to do. So that is 1.28. Not a lot to get excited about. In fact, almost nothing there. So definitely a disappointing release, but there are other things in the work there. Back in April, I never did a video on this, I don't think anyways, but my mind is slowly going addled with COVID. April, they announced a brand new renderer, and there's some really cool stuff going on here. Now, this is going to get into a ton more technical detail than I want to, but I will have this article linked. If you want to check it out, I'll link it in the linked article down below. But they're basically rewriting the renderer or the back engine. So this is the backbone for future Lumberyard visuals, and I get it. You know what? You're not going to be able to do a whole lot around the edges if you're rewriting the underlying plumbing. So that might be why this release is a little bit on the underwhelming side, or a lot on the underwhelming side. So they have this new renderer in the works. Got some really nice features here. Support for forward+ rendering out of the box. Infrastructure to readily add deferred rendering in the future. Support for DirectX 12, Vulkan, and Metal. That is big. And then this is huge. So one of the big limitations of Lumberyard is the mobile support has always been iffy. This is true of CryEngine. It's a legacy thing from CryEngine. And I'm wondering if the new Atom renderer, if the old renderer is what held them back from good multi-platform support. So with this new Atom renderer, you're going to get mobile support, and that's a pretty big deal. So that's nice. That's definitely a good thing here. We get into a lot more details. The engine itself is modular and customizable. Think kind of like the programmable pipelines that you've got in the world of Unity. They're kind of going that route as well. So you've got some details on how you can set up various different pipelines and how things will work, how it's scripted using JSON. Here's an overview of how the underlying architecture works. You're going to notice here you've got those back-end layerings there underneath the rendering interface. It's pretty straightforward in the way it's set up. The key thing here, and this is one of those things you're going to find with pretty much every single game engine out there, is they have their own shader language. And almost always that shader language is inspired by HLSL. But in the world of OpenGL, that you need GLSL. And then in the world of SPIR-V or Vulkan, it gets a little bit even more confusing. So what ends up happening is every single game engine creates a scripting language for shaders that kind of makes it platform agnostic and then compiles down to the shaders you needed. And Amazon is no exception. They came up with AZSL, or the Amazon Shading Language. I bet you that name took hours to come up with. And the big thing there, once again, is you can write your shader once and deploy it across multiple platforms. It's basically an extension of HLSL. So that is something else that they have done here. Performant, PBR-based workflow. So that is kind of the international norm out there. Data-driven. So definitely Atom is an interesting thing to look forward to. And I can get, like, if this is the kind of thing that the team is working on, until this ships, you're going to have a lot of, like, kind of hang-ups. You're kind of even seeing that a little bit with Godot right now with the move to Vulkan. Well, that had so many other interdependencies that you have to wait to 4.0 before you can bring all this other stuff in. I think Amazon's kind of going to do the same thing. A new renderer would definitely be appreciated, especially if it brings multi-platform support. The other things they talked about are new math libraries and new networking libraries. The math library news, well, it's nothing to get too exciting about, but what they've done is they've had a number of different math libraries in-house. They have the ones they acquired from CryEngine themselves, so the legacy CryEngine math libraries. They acquired a company called Double Helix, and they're using their math libraries, and then some of their own that the Lumberyard team has written. What they're doing is basically consolidating everything and making the logic more consistent, more performant, and have it make more sense, clean up the APIs, and so on. So if you want to get into the details of how math has changed, the nice thing is you're going to get some performance improvements from the math rewrites. And again, changing things at the math level is going to give you, it's a very fundamental thing. So this would also explain why we haven't seen a ton of updates going on here, because this is pretty fundamental. A renderer and your math engines they're pretty key to the world of game engines, so I get it. And another trend that's kicking in here is things like better performance on things like ARM platforms. ARM, of course, being the underlying architecture behind, well, everything, really. The M1 chip from Apple and the Snapdragon chip from Samsung, for example, they're all ARM technology based at some point in time. So if you want to support a mobile in a performant way, well, this was another hang-up they've got. So they're optimizing it for the various different architectures out there. And then the other aspect is a new network transport. So before they had something called GridMate. Now they are working on, and again, someone must have spent hours coming up with this name, AS Network, which stands for Amazon Networking. Yeah, that one's brilliant. So AS Networking is a new core Lumberyard API, new transport layer, so it's streamlined, performant, and battle-tested in terms of features. Well, we got things like create UDP, TCP clients and hosts, send unreliable unordered packets, or fall back to TCP when reliable ordering is available. Now, this is a key because you'd think, well, why the hell would I ever send something unreliably? Well, because it's faster. And if it's not really, if you can kind of ignore packet loss and just kind of interpolate the results, you can get by with faster UDP networking. Otherwise, you've got to use the slower but more guaranteed TCP. Well, it's take care of those things for you. DTLS encryption for UDP and TLS for TCP. Diagnostics built in, and so on. So basically, they are building a new networking interface. Hey, Unity, isn't that a good idea? Isn't that a good idea? So anyways, that's what they're working on right there to replace their existing one. So those are three pretty fundamental things they're working on. A new networking layer, a new math layer, and then an all-new renderer, which includes support for the most important platforms that are out there, with more to come. So it looks like they are future-proofing their engine, which led us to today's news that isn't really news, that since Amazon 1.27 was released, which had some, nice features in it, 1.28 is pretty much empty. So yeah, that was a long video about 1.28 having almost nothing in it, but we have some stuff to look forward to. And along with all these new things, the new render, the new networking, the new math libraries, the new mobile support and all that stuff, please don't stop focusing on the installation experience, because it still sucks. So nice to see improvements there. Definitely, I like to see this being streamlined, but I think you've got a long way to go, especially when you look at like CryEngine. CryEngine got a whole lot better about the installation process, and hopefully Lumberyard can follow suit in that regard, but they seem to be taking steps in the right direction, and these things, somewhat interesting. So let me know what you think of Lumberyard. I'm not asking about the 1.28 release, because I don't think anyone's going to disagree with me that this one is underwhelming. But these things like the Atom renderer, the new math libraries, the new networking libraries, and the future direction of Amazon Lumberyard. What do you think? Comments down below. Let me know, and I will talk to you all later. Goodbye.